So good to be here. I've heard such wonderful things about the Friendship Cafe, so I'm happy to join you today. The one thing that I like to talk about, because it's a passion of mine, is Parkinson's disease. We know that Muhammad Ali has Parkinson's, Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's, and then I have to share that my mother had it. She had it for 30 years, passed away 10 years ago. But then I have a twin sister, and just this past December, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's even more time for me to work toward the cure of finding what causes Parkinson's disease. But I wanted to tell you, do any of you know anybody that has Parkinson's? Yes? One back? Your father had it? Anybody else?
My dad had it.
Dad? Okay. Well, it is a disease. It's a neurological disease that affects the nervous system, and about 1 million people in the United States have Parkinson's. And we hear about it for younger people now than we've ever done before, so we see that a lot. But about 60,000 people are diagnosed each year with the disease. It was named after a Dr. James Parkinson's. Years ago, and I remember my family saying, oh, great-grandma had palsy. And that's where it came from. So it wasn't called Parkinson's back then. But Dr. James Parkinson's back in 1817 wrote a book, and it was called Shaking Palsy. So that's how he identified it back then. And I've heard that in our family before. But a lot of times with Parkinson's, it affects people differently. Some, it causes slowness of movement. And sometimes you'll see rigidity or tremor. And I think that's the key sign. You'll see a hand shaking. But you'll also see this, a little shuffling of the feet sometimes. And that also is a sign that it might be Parkinson's. It can affect the hands, the arms, the legs. And oftentimes it'll be worse on one side versus the other side of your body. Also, we can have appear frozen. Sometimes people with Parkinson's will just freeze, particularly going through a doorway. And so with that, sometimes, I know this is odd, but when my mother would do that, I would stick my foot out, and I know people probably thought I was tripping her, but she would step over my foot. So that frozenness that you get with Parkinson's can sometimes just be avoided by sticking your foot out and have them step over, or sometimes even counting to just kind of keep a rhythm, and then almost like marching, and that will help out with people with Parkinson's. Balance problems are an issue, and so for us at Westminster Canterbury, we have a pool, and so that will help with balance and things like that if you can get in and exercise with a pool. Oftentimes in Parkinson's, you'll hear somebody say, I am just so fatigued. I don't have any energy at all. And that does come along with it. Make them very tired. And almost like their legs are just weighted down. They just don't have the energy. We also see that facial expressions might change. Have you ever seen somebody that just had this masked look? They don't have any expression on their face? That often is a sign of Parkinson's disease. Their voice can get very low. We used to laugh at my mother. We would agree with her. And one day, my niece said to me, you better be careful agreeing with Ma all the time because you don't know what you're agreeing to. And we laughed, and so I asked her, would she do voice therapy? And she just kind of put up a fight against me, but she did it. And it did make a difference. There's an LSVT program out that's called LSVT Loud, and that can help with the voice, just keeping that voice up. The other thing is your handwriting gets very small. You know, it's so hard to read, and Mama would write things and we just couldn't read it because it was just so small. And then people that will get very anxious sometimes, and that only makes the Parkinson's worse, as you know it does in so many other diseases. It also can cause depression. Think about it. You've been able to do things and go and do what you wanted, And now all of a sudden life has changed. You know, you're just not as able because of maybe freezing when you go through a door, or just, you know, not knowing if you're going to be able to move or not because of those motor skills. And sleep, sometimes sleep disturbance. People just say, I'm sleepy during the day, but I can't really sleep at night. And that happens with Parkinson's disease. So, and that could be medication too. Anyway, Parkinson's, by the time you are diagnosed with Parkinson's, 80% of the dopamine in your brain has already disappeared. And you can't go back and put that back into it. You can take medicine all day long. Cinemet is the drug of choice that came out in the 1960s, and that seems to be what they give most people now. You can, and as you progress in the disease, then you might take other drugs that will make that drug last longer, stretch it out. There is quite a market, pharmaceutical market out there for drugs for Parkinson's disease. Often, like when my sister just went in December and was diagnosed, he had her walk down the hall. And the one thing he noticed was her gait, how she walked, but the lack of moving your arms. Oftentimes they're just beside you. They're not moving like we do when we walk. So that was one way of seeing that she had Parkinson's. And then sometimes they'll order an MRI. Over at the VA hospital, there is an eye clinic over there that actually can do an eye test and tell if you have Parkinson's or not. And so that's interesting, and but that this doctor over there is doing that. So I heard both of you say that you had your fathers that had Parkinson's, and it is a disease for men and women. It is a little bit higher in men. So we do see that, and a higher number of men are affected than women. And I already mentioned it, but there are more and more people that are being affected younger. It used to be like you were 60 or above, and now it's even affecting younger people. So anyway, so we're doing something different in the world that is causing more of it. But I will tell you that Parkinson's, the cause of it is unknown. Sometimes they think you could have lived in a rural area with pesticides, and that could have caused it. It could be well water if you lived in the country. So they had said that. And then they say it could be heredity. Now that my sister has been diagnosed with it, and my mother had it, and then my dad's brother had it, I'm guessing that it's certainly along that line. And they're doing great studies to do that. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, I wanted to say that my father was a house painter, so I wondered with what you said, and breathing in paint all those years.
See, that's what they're saying it could be. Could be that environment that causes it. Oftentimes with Parkinson's, you will see a neurologist, and there are neurologists will treat you, but there are also something called a movement disorder doctor. And that means that that person has done a little more schooling and has worked with people with Parkinson's. So here in the Richmond area, we're very lucky to have a lot of neurologists, but we also have quite a few movement disorder doctors too. The VCU Center has got a clinic out at Short Pump called the Now Center, and that has been wonderfully received because it used to be you're diagnosed with Parkinson's and you need physical therapy, or you might need speech therapy, and you were running all over Richmond to get those different services. And now the Now Clinic provides all of those. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. So you go and you can get therapy, and you can get physical therapy or speech therapy all in one place. So that's been helpful. I will tell you that you can take all the medicine in the world for Parkinson's, and you have to be able to survive. But the one thing that's important is exercise, and we hear that all the time. So it doesn't really matter if you have Parkinson's or any other disease. Exercise is just so important, whether it's in the pool, whether it's sitting down and doing exercises in your chair. It is just so important. So I would say that is right up there with your taking your medicine, is to get in a program. Yes, ma'am?
Why is it diagnosed so late?
Just because the signs are often misjudged and they don't know what it is. People will say to me, I knew something was going on years ago, but nobody could diagnose it. So that's why. But anyway, just finally they'll, decide that it is Parkinson's. It's funny because I noticed about a year ago with my sister a little bit of tremor in her hand. But we all have that. If we're fatigued or, if our blood sugar's down, sometimes that might happen. And so it's been about a year. And for her, the tremor got worse. So, and trying to work and have your hand shake. So, one thing that I would say to all of you is find humor in whatever you do. And that is so important when you're dealing with any kind of disease, and certainly with Parkinson's. We have a support group, and I was telling the group when we came in today, we used to meet right next door in the cottage over here for years. And we have the support group once a month, the first Tuesday of every month. We've been doing it over 30 years, and we've moved a couple places, and now we're back at Circle Center, which is now behind the Krispy Kreme. It's a great reason to go to the meeting. Then you can go to Krispy Kreme afterwards. Look at me, you can tell I love Krispy Kreme. But anyway, so we have a meeting there, and we used to meet right on the property next door. And so that's important to get involved in support groups, because we sit around, we have this meeting coming Tuesday night, and we always are laughing. It's something funny that somebody says. One time coconut oil was the new thing out there. And so we got this really kick out of somebody who was using coconut oil, because if you heard him tell it, that's what made you laugh. But anyway, so find humor in whatever when you're dealing with Parkinson's. The other thing is there is a surgery for Parkinson's dealing with that, and it's called deep brain stimulation. And that is they go in and put a little electrode in your brain, and then it runs down into a little pacemaker, not on the heart side, but on the other. And that can help with kind of giving you the spark, to help you keep moving. So that has been very well received, and they're getting even better with that all the time. And that just has helped a lot of people. Yes, ma'am?
When I lived in New York, I was working at a hospital where they had a world-famous surgeon, Dr. Irving Cooper,
Okay.
who operated on a lot of people who had Parkinson's, other neurological diseases also, but people actually came from all over the world in his surgery.
To see him, yeah. And now, when my mother was diagnosed, she was 50 years old, and she couldn't even have an MRI here in Richmond. She had to go out of town, so that was that many years ago. So people will travel. And now we're so lucky to have Dr. Catherine Holloway is at MCV, and for many years we had Dr. Wooten at UVA. So we're very fortunate to live in a town that really has a lot of resources for us. Besides being a support group to go to, which is important, you will learn so much from others, but we have this one the first Tuesday of every month, and right now I mentioned behind Krispy Kreme. The VA has one during the day, and that's the fourth Thursday of every month, so if you want to go to that. There's an exercise group at the Y over at John Rolfe, which is in the far, far West End, and they have a group. And for me, what I see is exercise is important, but so is socialization, getting out with people that are dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. I've already mentioned the Now Clinic, and then we have an annual conference. We were doing it every year here in Richmond. Now we're doing it every 2 years. So we have one coming up this year in September, at the end of September in Williamsburg. And it's usually $25 for the day, and that gives you breakfast and lunch and an all-day sessions on dealing with Parkinson's. So we get some great speakers. But the one thing I'd want to tell each of you is that Parkinson's affects each of us differently. If you are one that is having nursing care, or you have a loved one that is receiving nursing care, make sure that the medication is given on time. In retirement homes and all that, and in the hospital, you have a 2-hour window that you can give medicine. That doesn't work for people with Parkinson's. They need their medicines on time, and they'll tell you that. They can tell when it's wearing off. So if nothing else, you be the advocate for that person with Parkinson's to make sure they get their medicine on time. I will take any questions if anybody has any.